What is going on, guys? This is Crozen, and welcome back to Baldur's Gate 3 with my Shadowheart Immortal Death Cleric build. So I'm not really doing any new games on the channel right now, so I figured I would go back into Baldur's Gate 3 and do a couple of new builds for you guys. I actually did a recent honor mode run, and I tried Death Cleric out for the first time on Shadowheart, and this thing just wrecked. It was by far my favorite subclass for a cleric, and it just has a very nice vibe to it, and this thing is an AoE monster. Like, you can do a lot of damage with this, and even though there aren't that many items that synergize well with necrotic abilities, there are a few, and I will go over all of them in this video. So I hope you guys enjoy this one, and let's get into making the build. So beginning with our class and abilities, most of us want to start out as a cleric. However, this build does require one respec at level 9. That way we can get heavy armor proficiency and constitution save proficiency. So if you already have a high level Shadowheart, then you can just go ahead and select fighter here. But for the rest of us, let's just go ahead and start out as a cleric. Our subclass is of course going to be the Death Domain, and then for our 3 cantrips we want to go ahead and select Bursting Sinew, as well as Guidance and Toll the Dead. So Toll the Dead is going to be your bread and butter cantrip, and this is going to pair up very nicely with Reaper, which means you're going to be able to target 2 creatures whenever you use Toll the Dead. And then for our additional cantrip, we're going to go ahead and select Bone Chill, and that's going to be your secondary cantrip for those enemies that have a high spell save difficulty class. Our ability point spread is going to look like this, so we're going to start with 16 Dexterity for higher initiative, also 16 Wisdom for the spell attack rolls and the spell save difficulty class. From there, I just go with 14 Constitution, 10 Strength, 10 Intelligence, and then I lower Charisma down to 8 since I don't expect anyone to use Shadowheart for any dialogue checks. So our skill proficiencies are going to be History and Medicine. I also want to point out that Shadowheart does get an additional high elf cantrip, and the most unique one here is going to be Booming Blade, and you can use this for your melee attacks, and they should be quite decent early on in the game, especially with 16 Dexterity. Our next step is to go through our level path and our feats, and at this point we want to keep going into a cleric for Spirit Guardians, as well as being able to bypass enemies' resistance to necrotic damage, and that's going to require Cleric level 6. So at Cleric level 2 we get one important subclass feature, and that is Touch of Death. You're mostly going to be using Touch of Death with Inflict Wounds since that counts as a melee attack, but you can also use this with Booming Blade, and later on in Act 3 you can even use this with a set of gloves, which I will try to showcase somewhere in this video towards the end. So at this point we want to keep progressing into a cleric until we unlock our first feat, so go ahead and get to Cleric level 4. At that point you will get your first feat here, and we're going to keep it very simple here. We're just going to go with ability improvement and raise up our wisdom, and then for our additional cantrip you can basically select anything that you want here. None of these are going to really matter towards our build, so I just go ahead and select light. Now that we hit level 5, we unlock our most important spell for any cleric, and that is Spirit Guardians. So anytime there are more than 1 or 2 enemies, I recommend just casting Spirit Guardians and running into the enemies, and since this is a death cleric, I recommend going with the necrotic side for the damage. I do want to point out that we also get Vampiric Touch at level 5, but this does require concentration, so it is going to conflict with Spirit Guardians, so in most cases just cast Spirit Guardians. However, if there is only 1 enemy, then you can settle for Vampiric Touch and regain a little bit of health. So the next biggest upgrade for a Death Cleric comes at level 6. Not only do we get 1 additional Channel Divinity, so now we can cast Touch of Death twice every short rest, but we also get Inescapable Destruction, which means that our spells will ignore resistance to necrotic damage. So this is huge because most of our spells are going to be necromancy spells, and even our Spirit Guardians is going to be necrotic damage. So you want to make sure that your first 6 levels are put in a Death Cleric solely for this reason. So now that we've hit level 7, this is the perfect time to start multiclassing, simply because we're not going to get much more out of a cleric other than scaling Touch of Death with your cleric level. So at this point I like to multiclass and I go into Druid, so make sure for the cantrip that you do pick up the Shillelagh, because this is going to allow you to scale your damage with Wisdom on your staff, so you can actually use that with Booming Blade if you want to, and you can also pick up Thorn Whip here. At level 8, make sure that you put this point into a Druid as well, and for the subclass, go ahead and select Circle of the Stars. This has amazing synergy with a Spirit Guardians Cleric in general for one ability, and that is Starry Form Dragon. This will not only make it a lot easier to maintain concentration on your Spirit Guardians, but as a bonus action, you can actually cast Dazzling Breath, which is another nice AoE move that works very well with Spirit Guardians. So now that we've hit level 9, this is the perfect time to respec your character and start out as a fighter. So the reason we want to respec and start out as a fighter is for the heavy armor proficiency. There are actually a lot of good heavy armor sets out there towards the end of Act 2 and into Act 3, and this is going to allow you to raise your armor class even higher since we're not going to be raising our dexterity anymore. We're also going to get Constitution save proficiency, which is going to help us out with our Spirit Guardians. So for the fighting style, just go ahead and select defense. This is going to give you a +1 bonus to your armor class, and in Act 3 with a specific armor set that we're going to use, it's going to stack to a +2 bonus. So for the abilities, just go ahead and keep everything else the same. We will be changing the skill proficiencies, however, and we want to go with athletics and acrobatics, that way we can resist being shoved. So from here, just follow the path that I showed you over the last few minutes and you should be back at level 9. So now that you've reached level 10, this is the perfect opportunity to put another level into Fighter, that way you can unlock Action Surge, and this will give you a nice little damage boost on your first round. So now that we're level 11, we do have two options. We could either put our last 2 levels into Cleric or Druid in order to get our last feat. I personally like to go with Cleric, so even though these level 4 spells aren't going to be that useful for us, we still will get scaling with Touch of Death because Touch of Death will scale with your Cleric level. So put those last points into Cleric, and you also will unlock Divine Strike Necrotic. However, it's not that useful since we're already going to have Booming Blade with Touch of Death, but you will get your second feat. And for this feat, we're going to keep it simple again. Just go with Ability Improvement and get your Wisdom up to 20. So our next step in order to complete our build is getting the proper equipment. So I had one goal in mind whenever I was mixing and matching equipment sets. I wanted to have a very high armor class while still having a few items that synergize well with our necrotic abilities. So starting with our helmet, our endgame helmet is going to be Helm of Baldur. This is going to give you a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws, and more importantly, attackers can't land critical hits. Some early game helmets that you can use are the Diadem of Arcane Synergy in Act 1, same for Holy Lance Helm, and then in Act 2 you can go for the Fistbreaker Helm. Our cloak is going to be Wave Mother's Cloak, and I recently just found out about this item. This actually gives you a +2 bonus to your armor class and saving throws as soon as you start your turn in a fight. So technically, we would have 31 armor class here, and +1 of that is coming from Warding Bond. As for an alternative, you can also use Cloak of Protection in Act 2, and you can use Cloak of Protection for the entire game if you wish. For the endgame heavy armor, we're going to go with Helldusk Armor, and this is mainly for the armor class. So with the defense fighting style, this is actually going to give you a +2 bonus to your armor class rather than a +1. As for some alternative sets, early on in Act 1 you are going to be using medium armor, and the best medium armor for this build is the Adamantine Scale Mail, so make sure that you do pick this up, and you are going to be using this all the way until level 9. At that point you will unlock that heavy armor proficiency from Fighter, and then you can go with the Dwarven Splint Mail, and then you could also go with Reaper's Embrace, and in Act 3 you could even go for Armor of Persistence if you do not want to use Helldusk Armor. As far as the gloves, there are several gloves out there that provide some synergy with a Death Cleric, and my favorite are the Gemini gloves. So this you can get in Act 3, and this will turn your Toll the Dead into an AoE cantrip, which you can use once per short rest. In Act 1, I do recommend the Daredevil gloves. Not only will this give you a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, but this actually works out very well with Bone Chill. So this will allow you to use your Bone Chill as a melee attack without receiving disadvantage, and it will allow you to use Touch of Death with that. So it has some very nice synergy with Bone Chill, and you're still going to get a +1 bonus to your spell attack roll. So technically, this is the best pair of gloves that you can use for this build, and I will try to showcase some of that towards the end of this video so that way you can see that in combat. The other alternatives in Act 1 are going to be Gloves of the Growling Underdog for advantage on your melee attack rolls, and then also Wondrous Gloves if you do want a +1 bonus to your armor class. And another set of gloves that works really well with the Death Cleric are the Quick Spell gloves, because this will allow you to cast your cantrip as a bonus action, so you're mainly going to be using this for Toll the Dead. However, this is also once per short rest, and I prefer the Gemini gloves over the Quick Spell gloves. The boots are really simple here. All we're going to go with are the evasive shoes for a +1 bonus to armor class. You can also go with boots of striding, that way you can't get knocked prone while you are concentrating. Our endgame amulet is going to be Amulet of the Devout. This is going to give you a +2 bonus to spell save difficulty class, which is going to work out very well with Toll the Dead, and you're also going to get 1 additional channel divinity per long rest. Now you do have a few alternatives here. You can use the Spell Crux Amulet and you can put this on your hotkey. That way you can use this for aid and then just swap back over to the Amulet of the Devout. You also have Amulet of Greater Health if you want more HP. You also will get advantage to Constitution saving throws, but it's really not that necessary since we do have Star Druid. And then you also can use the Amulet of Misty Step early on in Act 1. For the rings, we're going to keep it very simple here. So early on in Act 1, you can get Ring of Protection for the armor class and saving throw. And then in Act 2, you can get the Coruscation Ring. And this actually has very good synergy with Toll the Dead, because every time you use Toll the Dead, it's going to inflict radiating orbs on enemies. So this works out very well, and it stacks like crazy with the Gemini gloves, which you guys will see in the combat showcase. So Staff of Cherished Necromancy is going to be our endgame staff. Not only will creatures receive disadvantage on saving throws against our necromancy spells, but we also will obtain Life Essence Harvest every time we kill a creature with a spell, so that way we can upcast a level 5 Inflict Wounds without expending a spell slot. So your 2 early game options in Act 1 will either be Melf's First Staff for the spell save difficulty class and spell attack roll bonus, or if you want to be more of a melee attacker, you can go for Falar Alluve since we will have 16 dexterity, and this works out very well with Booming Blade. Later on in Act 2, you can use the Infernal Rapier, and then early on in Act 3, you can also go for Hollow Staff before you get Staff of Cherished Necromancy. As far as the shields, there are so many different options out there that it's going to be personal preference. I like Ketheric's shield, not only for the spell save difficulty class and spell attack rolls, but I just love the way this shield looks, especially on a Death Cleric. Baconia's Walking Fortress works out very well in Act 3, and obviously this will give you more armor class. You also will have access to Shield of Scorching Reprisal in Act 2, and I believe this is an underrated shield that I don't really see used a lot, because it does have Blazing Retaliation, and this will give you a +1 bonus to your armor class, and you will also be able to reflect fire damage back at attackers whenever they miss. And early on in Act 1, you can also go with the Adamantine Shield. And lastly, the ranged weapon is mainly just going to consist of whatever stat stick weapon that you want. I like Hellrider Longbow for the initiative, but if you do have another character that's using this, then you can go for Bow of Awareness. You can also go for some early game options like Gandrel's Aspiration or the Hunting Shortbow, and this will give you advantage against monstrosity type enemies. And now for my favorite part, the combat showcase. So I do have Elixir Bloodlust and Haste activated in order to gain more actions to showcase more abilities. And if you guys want to take a look at my armor class, it is at a nice 33 with all of these effects on here, including a +1 from Warding Bond from another character. So all clerics want to use Spirit Guardians, that's their #1 move, and a Death Domain is no different. So you want to just go ahead and upcast a Spirit Guardians to the highest level, and we want to use the necrotic version since we are a Death Cleric, and just start moving around the battlefield, targeting as many enemies as you can. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. And don't worry too much about opportunity attacks because we have such a high armor class that we won't have to worry about that. So I'm going to try to target myself just a little bit over here for a nice AoE move with Dazzling Breath, and this comes from Starry Form Dragon from the Star Druid. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that here. And it does provide you with a nice little AoE move that you can use every turn as a bonus action. So I feel like it has amazing synergy with any Spirit Guardians cleric. So now we can use the Gemini gloves, and we could turn Toll the Dead into an AoE cantrip. So let's just go ahead and toggle that on. And basically the way this works is you want to try to get all of these enemies within both circles. And the way you do that is mainly just targeting the enemies in the center. So as you can see here, all 5 of these enemies are within both circles, which means that Toll the Dead is going to attack each one of them twice. And that's also going to mean that it's going to stack radiating orbs 4 times on every single one of these enemies. And as you guys can see, it deals a lot of damage. Unfortunately, you can only use this once per short rest, but on those fights where you know there's a lot of enemies, this works out very well. So now what we can do is basically just use another Toll the Dead and take out some of these other enemies here that have a little bit of health. So we can go ahead and just do that. And now we can use Action Surge, that way we gain another action, and we can do basically the same thing here. So I'm just going to use Toll the Dead again, take another enemy out, and then we could finish this enemy off with Spirit Guardians, hopefully next round, and then the last two as well. So now that we're in turn 2, I do want to go over a few other abilities that are going to be your bread and butter for a Death Cleric, one of them being Bone Chill. So Bone Chill is generally going to deal less damage than Toll the Dead, and the only reason you would want to use Bone Chill over Toll the Dead is if you have a higher percentage chance of getting this to hit over Toll the Dead, because Bone Chill uses a spell attack roll, whereas Toll the Dead uses a spell save. So as you can see, I'm better off using Toll the Dead here, but for the sake of this video, let's just go ahead and use Bone Chill. Now this does have amazing synergy with Daredevil Gloves, because what Daredevil Gloves will do with Bone Chill is it'll turn it into a melee attack, which means that Touch of Death will activate twice on 2 different enemies. So even though I'm not going to go over that in the sake of this combat showcase, I will try to put a clip at the very end of this video showcasing how that looks. So in this case, let's just go for a regular Bone Chill here, and let's take this enemy out. And now we can just make our move over here and get this enemy with a nice little Spirit Guardians. And I also want to showcase what you can do with your staff. So you can also use melee attacks, and in our case here, since we are using a staff, we can use the Shillelagh in order to make this scale off of our Wisdom modifier, and that makes it to where you can actually gain a very high percentage. So as you can see, now our percent went up to 95%, and we can use Booming Blade with our staff, which is actually just ridiculous, but it works out pretty well. I feel like as I got further on into the game, I used melee damage less, and I just stuck with my spells and inflict wounds for my melee attack. But this is definitely an option, especially early on in the game, and this will also activate Touch of Death whenever you get the melee attack in. So in this case, the enemy already had very low HP, so we didn't even get a chance to see Touch of Death. So another thing that I do want to showcase is the Staff of Cherished Necromancy with Consumed Life Essence. Basically what this will do is it will allow you to use an upcasted inflict wounds to the max level without expending a spell slot. So as soon as you already attack an enemy and kill them with a spell, you will have access to this. So let's just go ahead and do that. No, we do not want Spirit Guardians. So let's just go up to an upcasted inflict wounds. And the nice thing about this is that it activates Touch of Death, which is really what we want. So thank you guys for watching this video all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoyed this Shadowheart Immortal Death Cleric build. And this build is a lot of fun and definitely a little different for a cleric because we're going to be using so many necrotic abilities, whereas most clerics will use radiant damage, right? So I really like this one. It gives a whole different feel to cleric in general, and it really fits Shadowheart a lot. So I hope you guys give this one a try and let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.